you're back. We're more than halfway through our top trends to watch in 2025 miniseries, in which we're sharing expert insights and opinions about the most influential trends happening in the pet nutrition space today, and how pet parents can stay informed and engaged as these trends evolve this year and beyond. Thanks for joining us so far, and prepare yourself for another thought-provoking installment of this series. Today, focused on sustainable pet food and treat packaging. There's been a common theme in our previous 3 trends episodes, and that's a need for education, whether around identifying real sustainability initiatives from greenwashing, understanding the merits and unknowns of alternative proteins, or bringing pet parents around to the power of biotic ingredients and moderating and improving their pet's gut health. But there's yet another area ripe for education, and you've probably already guessed it has to do with today's trend of sustainable packaging. In today's episode, we're going behind the scenes of a few major companies' sustainable packaging commitments, speculating on whether or not they will actually achieve the goals they set for 2025, and discussing why recycling is so confusing and difficult for consumers, and how the industry is working to overcome such barriers. Welcome to Barking Mad, a podcast by BSM Partners. I'm your host, Jordan Tyler. There is a significant need to reduce the amount of plastic waste the industry puts out into the world each year. While progress is certainly being made in this area, there is plenty of room for improvement. According to the Pet Sustainability Coalition, which is an organization dedicated to supporting pet industry companies as they seek to become more sustainable, the North American pet food and treat industry alone is responsible for more than 300 million pounds of flexible plastic packaging annually, of which 99% is effectively unrecyclable, due to being made of multiple materials all laminated together that are impossible to recycle altogether or even separate to recycle separately. According to Allison Reeser, Director of Sustainability and Innovation at Pet Sustainability Coalition, this packaging waste comes with jarring environmental impacts.
Plastic packaging, when it is in the landfill, it's either like leaching chemicals there, that's not a great outcome, or if it ends up in the environment, of course, that is a problem from a biodiversity standpoint. But even from a business standpoint, it just doesn't make sense, the linear economy model where you take a natural resource, you use it for a while, and then it just goes and sits in a pile somewhere to waste away. So I'm really excited about the circular economy. I think it can bring a lot of good benefit to packaging. But one of the key barriers is that the regular economics of it doesn't make sense. So things like glass and aluminum, we can commonly recycle those because a recycler can turn a profit on that. They can run it through their system, sell the output, and that is a business model for them. But flexible plastic packaging, like what our pet food is commonly packaged in, it just doesn't turn a profit. And recycling is really challenging for that. And so we got to make the economics work out.
So recycling is definitely a challenge, and we'll get to that piece of the equation here in just a minute. But first, I'm curious to know how companies are tackling this sustainable packaging conundrum. And Allison readily shared a couple different initiatives that she's seen.
The biggest thing I'm hearing most from companies is a switch to monomaterial packaging, which is also called recycle-ready packaging. And it's like as simple as it sounds. So a lot of flexible plastic packaging is made up of multiple different types of plastics. So when it goes to recycling, like you'd have to separate those plastics apart, and that's very difficult. So I'm seeing a lot of packaging suppliers and the brands that would source that packaging switch to monomaterial, which again is just easier to recycle because you don't have to separate out those component parts. So no, there's a ton of investment going into that, which I love to see. I'm also seeing a lot of conversations about post-consumer recycled content. I know that that tends to land really well with customers if they say like, oh, this is a post-consumer recycled bag of some sort. So there are some companies looking into that. And also I wanted to call out that post-industrial recycled content is a little bit easier to implement right now. So what that means is if there's any sort of packaging or material that is kind of a waste product from making the package in the beginning, so it hasn't been in a consumer's arms yet, that material is a little cleaner and easier to recycle into something else. So I'm seeing some companies take advantage of that as well.
Okay, so switching to monomaterial bags and incorporating post-consumer or post-industrial recycled materials are a couple things we have up our sleeves to try to reduce this insane amount of plastic packaging waste. But I also asked Allison what other apparent challenges packaging suppliers and brands are facing today in the quest for more sustainable packaging materials. And she had a few things top of mind.
The heavy and bulky aspect is still a challenge. In talking to the packaging suppliers that we work with, they're still all trying to come up with the best solution for how can you have a mono material package that still stands up to a drop test when it is carrying, 50 pounds of dog food. So that's still a challenge. I don't think we've quite solved that one yet, but lots of companies working on it. The other one that really came to mind is the trend of fresh and frozen and interesting food formats in the pet food industry. That requires just a totally different type of packaging that needs to stand up to different sorts of conditions. And so I think the packaging side of things has to keep up with the brand and the product development side of things. And again, because what's inside of the package has way more impact, it's super important that that food stays fresh, because if there's any sort of spoilage or waste, that is like the worst possible outcome. So again, there's like a whole long list of priorities for packaging suppliers and packaging design.
In other words, achieving sustainable packaging is much more complicated than it seems. And if you've been paying attention, that's kind of a common theme for sustainability goals in general. Speaking of, let's look at this through the lens of the three major multinational pet food manufacturers out there today: Nestle Purina, Hill's Pet Nutrition, and Mars Pet Care. Starting with Purina, the company is committed to transitioning 100% of its plastic packaging materials to those that are designed for recycling or designed to be recycled. Currently, they are at around 90%, and their goal is to reach 95% by the end of 2025. At Hill's Pet Nutrition, 70% of their global pet food packaging by weight has been recyclable since 2019. And they've also been using recyclable corrugated boxes made with 65% recycled content since 2019 as well. They also claim they're working to reduce the amount of plastic they use overall. Now, what's really interesting are Mars Pet Care's commitments. So the company has several dog and cat food and treat brands that have publicly committed to various initiatives to reduce single-use plastic packaging, incorporate recycled materials, and lower carbon emissions associated with its packaging operations. And the sheer scale of changes that must be made to accommodate these sustainable packaging initiatives was actually discussed in a recent article in Packaging Dive, which we'll link in the show notes for this episode. But essentially, the article discusses how executives at Mars are kind of tempering their outlook when it comes to their sustainable packaging goals for 2025. They said they're making good progress. However, the design and infrastructure changes needed to facilitate this sort of shift are taking longer than they anticipated. So they're unlikely to fully meet their goal by the end of 2025. Well, 2025 is here, right? It's happening, whether we like it or not. And while these commitments were made years ago, the time of reckoning is upon us. What does this commentary from Mars really say about sustainable packaging as a trend? We spoke with Kim Zoukaitis, Director of Packaging Engineering at BSM Partners, to get the scoop.
These goals are set by their sustainable executive teams. But when it comes down to it, and I think that this is what a lot of companies are seeing, is that sustainable materials cost is a challenge. And so overcoming that is something that has to be done. And then every company has this goal set of 2025, and all the suppliers are really struggling to supply the materials to the companies for trialing and then for production. So that's a challenge as well, just the infrastructure of recyclable materials. And then finally, that it takes time, especially for consumer or pet food, to evaluate the product performance. So what that means is, in packaging, when we have a new material for a food item or a kibble or a treat, we have to do some sort of shelf life testing to make sure that we're not getting off flavors from the new material and things like that. And sometimes that can take, up to a year or even more. And so when you start thinking about the timeline, I can see why potentially some companies might be pulling back from that 2025 sustainability goal. But then I know as well, that companies are diligently working on it.
So I want to go back to the recyclability piece. A lot of plastics on the market are just not conducive to being recycled. And that's because the recycling infrastructure we have available to us doesn't always readily accept plastic materials for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is they cost more to recycle than they're worth after the fact. So there's kind of a return on investment issue there for material recovery facilities, or MRFs, if you've heard of that acronym. But according to Kim, many municipalities across the United States don't even accept plastics like pet food bags. So really the only avenue for getting these bags and films recycled is through a retail store drop-off program. And that requires buy-in from the consumer, right? Maybe it's an extra trip to the store. Maybe it's extra time. It's certainly not as convenient as just sticking it in your bin at home and dragging it out to the curb once a week. All that to say, there are still significant barriers.
And one thing, especially with treats and kibble bags, because we know when you open, there's a lot of grease in those, and those really need to be cleaned out and all debris removed. So that's another step that the consumers have to perform before they take them to their store drop-off locations. One other thing to mention is that as far as the store drop-offs, I think a lot of consumers wonder what happens to those materials. And I have heard some of the companies that, like PetSmart, talk about they do get that stuff recycled. It doesn't just go into a landfill. So they are doing something with it. So whether it's sometimes maybe turning it into a plastic bench or something like that, something is happening to it. It's not just going to the store from the consumer into the landfill. So that can make consumers feel a little bit better, right?
Despite these challenges, and as evidenced by Kim's last point here, good progress is still being made in the realm of sustainable pet food and treat packaging. When it comes to recycling in particular, Kim highlighted a really cool technology being used by material recovery facilities to close some of these gaps.
There's some really cool trends going on in recycling right now. And one of them is the use of AI in recycling, which I think is something that could really help what we've been talking about. A lot of the material recovery facilities are using AI so that they can do material identification. They can collect recycling trend data, which is going to be really helpful for the future. Any kind of sorting, this can help sort materials more efficiently. And then also, which I think is really interesting, is they are able to do household collection data so they can understand who's recycling what and better help educate the consumers. And these are all brand new things coming into the recycling industry, but really exciting, I think, to help change things.
With technological advancements on the horizon and continued consumer education, the path forward for sustainability remains rocky, but not impossible. I like to believe people want to do the right thing, and enhancing the accessibility of municipal recycling, as well as building out store drop-off programs and arming pet owners with accurate information about a package's ability to be recycled, are all steps in the right direction.
It's really confusing for consumers. And I've seen stats on the percentage of packaging recycled and really has not changed in 20 years. So I don't know if that's telling you something, but again, I think consumer education on what can be recycled and where it can go is so important to moving forward.
One way to affect this consumer education is through certifications and on-package labels, like the How to Recycle label, which I'm sure many of you have seen on some kind of product's packaging, whether you realized it or not. How to Recycle is all about being transparent with consumers about a package's ability to be recycled in an effort to reduce confusion and prevent recycling streams from being contaminated with non-recyclable materials. Now, when this contamination occurs, it can actually result in perfectly recyclable materials being thrown out with the contamination, which kind of negates the whole point of recycling to begin with. So for this reason and others, let's come back to Allison, who said she believes investment in consumer education is one of the most important pieces of the sustainability puzzle.
When we think about the consumer perspective of things, we want to be educating consumers about, like, okay, what should you do with your packaging? But most of the time they have no information about what the package is made out of. And so I respect so highly any company that will put on the How to Recycle label, but it says not recyclable, throw it away, because that's what consumers need to know, because falsely recycling things is a problem because that creates contamination. So if any company wants the nudge, please invest in properly labeling your package so consumers know what they need to do with it.
If you caught the first episode in our Trends to Watch in 2025 miniseries, you may recognize this as the direct opposite of greenwashing, which is definitely a step forward for the industry and for sustainability initiatives in general. And if you didn't catch this episode, we spent a good portion on the phenomenon of greenwashing and just how harmful it can be for real progress in sustainability. And of course, I'm biased, but I think it's a really valuable discussion and encourage you to check it out. Now, from the staggering amount of plastic waste generated by the industry annually to the challenges of making recycling both practical and profitable, there's no overnight fix to sustainable pet food and treat packaging. And while this episode comes to a close, we've really just started embarking down a path that could truly bring us closer to a more circular economy for product packaging. With innovations like monomaterial films, AI-powered recycling facilities, and increased consumer education and transparency, we'll be keeping our finger on the pulse of this trend moving forward this year and beyond through our sustainability series and other episodes aimed at helping you navigate the complex world of pet care. Don't forget to come back tomorrow when we'll wrap this series with a fifth and final trend to watch in 2025, personalized pet nutrition. This conversation will explore the increasingly tailor-made nature of our pets' nutrition, from custom-formulated diets to portion control to breed-specific science, all the way to wearable technologies that can tell us everything we need to know about our pets' health and what it has to do with their diet. We'll also provide a quick recap for the entire series, and I'll share my key takeaway from all of these trends. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thank you for tuning in to Barking Mad, a podcast by BSM Partners. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit our website at www.bsmpartners.net. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a fellow pet lover and leave us a review. Lastly, be sure to stay tuned for more insights this week from our Trends 2025 miniseries, as well as future episodes on pet care innovation, sustainability, and other hard-hitting topics you won't want to miss. We'd like to thank our dedicated team in support of this episode: Adamiette Thomas, Neely Bowden, Kate Wright, and Dr. Katie Miller. A special thanks to Leanne Haggerty and Michael Johnson. See you next time!